I was 19 years old when I learned what real fear feels like. Not the kind you get from a horror movie or a close call on the highway. I'm talking about the kind of fear that sits in your gut like a stone, the kind that makes every breath feel like you're stealing it from someone else. December 1944, somewhere in eastern France, and I was the driver of an M4 Sherman tank that had just become very, very alone. My name's not important anymore. What matters is that I was young, I was green, and I was terrified. I'd been in Europe for 4 months, assigned to the 3rd Armoured Division as a replacement after the original driver caught shrapnel in his legs near Aachen. The crew I inherited wasn't exactly welcoming at first. They'd lost 2 men already, and here comes this baby-faced kid from Pennsylvania who barely knew how to double-clutch the transmission without grinding the gears. But Sergeant Kowalski, our tank commander, was patient in his own rough way. He told me once, sitting on the turret during a supply stop, that every tanker starts out scared and stupid, and the goal is to stay alive long enough to just be scared. Our Sherman was named Lucky Strikes after the commander's favorite cigarettes. It wasn't lucky, and none of us smoked Luckies, but Kowalski said the name came with the tank, and changing it would be bad luck. The thing was a rolling coffin as far as I was concerned. 33 tons of riveted steel that the Germans called Tommy Cookers because of how fast they went up in flames when hit. The smell inside never left you either. Oil, sweat, cordite, and this metallic tang that coated your throat. I can still smell it sometimes, even now, 70-some years later. The crew was 5 of us total. Kowalski up in the turret, calling shots and reading maps. Miller on the main gun, a skinny guy from Chicago with hands that never stopped shaking until he was behind the sights. Rodriguez loaded shells, built like a damn ox, and the only one who could joke around even when we were getting shot at. Then there was Patterson, the bow gunner and assistant driver, a farm kid from Iowa who talked about his dad's tractor more than the war, and me, down in the driver's seat staring through a periscope the size of a mail slot, trying to keep us from throwing a track or driving into a ditch. We'd been pushing east for 3 days straight. The whole division was part of this massive advance, trying to keep pressure on the Germans before winter locked everything down solid. Hundreds of tanks, half-tracks, supply trucks, all moving in this long, grinding column through countryside that looked like it had been chewed up and spit out. The fields were frozen mud. The trees were skeletal. And every village we passed through was either burning or already burned. The cold was something else too. It got down into your bones through the steel hull, made your fingers stiff on the controls, made your breath fog up the periscope until you had to wipe it every few minutes. December 16th. Started like any other day in that miserable push. We got the order to move out at 05:30, still pitch dark, frost covering everything. Kowalski got the route from battalion, some tiny village called Malmedy or something close to it, I don't remember exactly. The plan was simple. Follow the column, maintain spacing, don't bunch up, don't fall behind. Standard armored advance procedure. We'd done it 100 times. The problem started with the fog. Around 0800, this thick, soupy fog rolled in from nowhere. I mean thick. I could barely see the tank in front of us. Just the faint glow of its exhaust, and maybe the outline of its rear end if I squinted. Patterson kept saying it was like driving through milk. Kowalski was up in the turret, trying to navigate by compass and the occasional glimpse of landmarks. But everything looked the same in that fog. Trees, fences, burned-out buildings, all just grey shapes in the white. We were supposed to be in the middle of the column, safe position, or as safe as anything gets in a war. But somewhere around 0900 we hit this intersection. I remember it because there was a shot-up German truck tilted in the ditch, and Kowalski told me to veer left around it. I did. Then the fog got even thicker and I lost sight of the tank ahead. I slowed down, thinking they'd just gotten a bit ahead, that I'd see their exhaust in a minute. But I didn't. Kowalski tried the radio. The SCR 508 was supposed to keep us in contact with the rest of the company, but all we got was static. He cycled through frequencies, called out our designation. Nothing. Just that empty hiss that makes your skin crawl when you're already on edge. Patterson suggested we stop, wait for the fog to clear, but Kowalski said negative. Stop in the middle of nowhere and you're a sitting duck. Keep moving. Try to find the column. Try to get the radio working. So I kept driving. 20 minutes. 30. An hour. The fog didn't lift. The radio didn't work. and none of us wanted to say out loud what we all knew. We were lost. Around 10:00, we finally stopped. Kowalski climbed down, told Miller to keep the gun traversed and ready, and pulled out his map case. I shut down the engine to save fuel, and the sudden silence was worse than the noise. You could hear your own heartbeat. Patterson lit a cigarette with shaking hands, and Rodriguez just stared at the hull interior, like it might tell him something useful. Kowalski spread the map on the glacis plate, trying to figure out where the hell we were. The problem was, every road looked the same, every field, every tree line, and in the fog, landmarks were just vague suggestions. That's when we heard the first sound. Distant, maybe half a mile away. Engines, not Sherman's, something else. Something with a deeper, heavier sound. German. Kowalski's eyes went hard and he folded the map fast. "Mount up," he said. Just that. Mount up. We didn't ask questions. I fired up the engine, that big radial coughing to life, and the sound felt like a scream in the quiet. Kowalski got us moving north, or what he thought was north, away from those engine sounds, but the fog was playing tricks. Sounds bounced weird, echoed, made it hard to tell where anything was. We drove for another 20 minutes, slow, engine barely above idle, trying to be quiet even though a 33-ton tank is never quiet. Then Patterson said, "I see something." I looked through my periscope, and sure enough, there were shapes ahead. Buildings. A village, small, maybe a dozen houses clustered around a crossroads. Kowalski told me to stop about 50 yards out, and we sat there, engine idling, watching. No movement, no smoke from chimneys, no people. It looked abandoned, but you never knew. The Germans were good at hiding, good at setting ambushes. Kowalski made the call. We'd go in, find a place to hide the tank, maybe get our bearings. If there were civilians, we'd ask about German positions. If there were Germans, well, we had a 75mm gun and a full load of ammunition. I drove us in slow, tracks crunching on the frozen road, the buildings closing in on either side. It felt like driving into a trap. The village was dead silent, not abandoned, just silent. I could see curtains moving in one window, faces peeking out and disappearing fast. Kowalski spotted a barn, big enough to fit the tank if we squeezed, and told me to pull in. I maneuvered us through the doors, and Rodriguez hopped out to close them behind us. The sudden darkness inside the barn was almost a relief. At least we weren't exposed. Kowalski climbed down, told Patterson to stay on the bow gun, told Miller to stay on the main gun, and took Rodriguez with him to do recon. I stayed in the driver's seat, hands on the controls, ready to fire up and move if things went south. They were gone maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. When they came back, Kowalski's face was grim. He'd found an old man in one of the houses, barely spoke any English, but the message was clear. Germans had been through here yesterday. A small patrol, maybe a dozen men heading east, and there were rumors of a bigger force, armor and infantry, somewhere to the south. We were behind enemy lines, or at least in contested territory, the kind of fluid front where nobody really controlled anything, but everybody was ready to kill you. Kowalski made the decision. We'd stay here for the night, hidden, conserve fuel, try to fix the radio. At first light, we'd try to navigate back west, find our lines, rejoin the division. It was a plan. Not a good one, but a plan. That first night was the longest of my life. We took shifts, 2 on watch, 3 trying to sleep, rotating every 2 hours. I drew first watch with Rodriguez. We sat in the darkness of that barn, listening to every sound. Wind rattling the doors, mice in the walls, distant artillery. So far away it was just a low rumble you felt more than heard. And closer, much closer, the sound of vehicles passing on a nearby road. Trucks, maybe. Half-tracks. We couldn't see them, but we could hear them, and that was enough to make your stomach turn. Rodriguez whispered to me, asked if I thought we'd make it back. I didn't know what to say. I was 19. I didn't know anything, but I told him, yeah, sure. Kowalski knew what he was doing. We'd be fine. He nodded, but I don't think either of us believed it. When your radio's dead and you're sitting in enemy territory in a tank that weighs more than 3 cars, but feels thin as paper, belief doesn't come easy. Morning came cold and grey, the fog still thick, but not as bad as the day before. Kowalski had Miller and Rodriguez work on the radio, while he and Patterson scouted the area on foot. I stayed with the tank, keeping watch through the periscope. The old man from the house came to the barn once, brought us some bread and water, didn't say much. His eyes were scared. I wondered what he'd seen, what he knew that we didn't. Kowalski came back around 0900 with bad news. The road west, the most direct route, had German positions. He'd seen them digging in, at least a platoon's worth, maybe more. Going that way would be suicide. Our only option was to circle north, try to find a gap in their lines, slip through at night. It meant more time in enemy territory, more fuel burned, more risk. But it was the only play we had. We spent the day waiting, making small repairs, rationing our food. The K-rations tasted like cardboard, but we ate them anyway. Miller got the radio partially working, managed to pick up some Allied chatter, but couldn't transmit. Something was fried in the circuit, and we didn't have the parts to fix it. All we could do was listen, hear reports of positions and movements that meant nothing to us, because we didn't know where we were in relation to them. The second night, we moved. Kowalski plotted a route that took us through fields and forest tracks, avoiding main roads. I drove with the periscope barely cracked, relying on Patterson to call out obstacles. No lights, no radio, just the sound of the engine and the squeak of the tracks. We made maybe 5 miles in 3 hours, stopping every time we heard something, freezing in place until it passed. Around midnight, we had our first real contact. We were moving through a narrow gap between two woods when Patterson saw movement. 3 figures, maybe 200 yards ahead, crossing the road. Kowalski called halt, and we sat there, engine idling, watching. The figures stopped. They'd heard us. For maybe 30 seconds, nobody moved. Then they started running, and Kowalski made a split-second decision. He didn't fire, didn't know if they were German stragglers, civilians, resistance fighters. Didn't matter. Firing would give away our position to anyone within a mile. We let them go and kept moving. An hour later, we almost drove straight into a German position. I saw it first through the periscope, just the faint outline of a vehicle, something tracked, something big. I slammed on the brakes, and Kowalski was already traversing the turret, Miller loading a shell, but the vehicle didn't move. Kowalski climbed out, crept forward, came back 5 minutes later. It was a Panzer IV, burned out, abandoned. Probably hit by air support days ago. We drove around it, giving it wide berth, the whole crew so tense you could feel it in the air. By 0300 we were exhausted. Kowalski found a dense stand of trees and ordered us to hide there until dawn. We shut down the engine, posted watch, and tried to rest. I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, playing out scenarios. What if we ran into a whole German column? What if we ran out of fuel before we found our lines? What if the old man had told the Germans about us, and they were tracking us right now? Every sound was a threat. Every shadow was an enemy. Dawn came, and we moved again. The fog was finally starting to lift, which was good and bad. Good because we could see where we were going. Bad because anyone else could see us too. Kowalski navigated by compass and by landmarks he thought he recognized from the map. A burned church steeple, a stone bridge over a frozen creek. We were heading northwest now, hoping to hit the Allied lines somewhere near the original objective. Around 0800 on the second day, 43 hours after we got separated, we ran into the worst moment of the whole ordeal. We were crossing an open field, no cover, when I saw vehicles ahead. Lots of them. A whole convoy stopped on a road. My heart jumped into my throat. Kowalski was already on the radio, trying to make contact, but still no transmit. Miller had the gun trained on the lead vehicle, a half-track. We crept closer, 50 yards, 40, 30, and then someone started waving. It was an American flag. GIs, a whole company of them, dug in along that road. They'd heard us coming, thought we might be German. We're seconds away from opening fire when someone spotted the white star on our hull. Kowalski stood up in the turret, waved back, and the relief that washed over me was so strong I thought I might pass out. We pulled up to their position, and an officer came over, a lieutenant looking at us like we were ghosts, asked where the hell we'd come from. Kowalski explained, gave our unit designation, told him about the fog and the radio and the past 2 days. The lieutenant just shook his head, said our column had reported us missing, presumed lost or destroyed. Said there'd been heavy German activity in the area we'd just come through, that we were lucky to be alive. Lucky. That word again. They gave us fuel, gave us rations, got our radio working with a replacement part from one of their tanks. We rejoined our division that afternoon, rolled back into the column like we'd never left. But it wasn't the same. Nothing was the same. Kowalski got chewed out by the company commander for losing the column, but it was half-hearted. Everyone knew it wasn't his fault, just bad luck and bad weather. We got reassigned to a different platoon, kept fighting, kept moving east. The war went on. But those 48 hours changed something in me. The others too, I think, though we didn't talk about it. You don't talk about fear like that. You don't talk about the moment you realize you're alone, cut off, surrounded by people who want you dead, and the only thing keeping you alive is luck and a few inches of steel. You don't talk about the decisions you almost made, the shots you almost took, the chances you almost didn't get. Patterson caught it worst. Kid started flinching at every sound, couldn't sleep, kept asking Kowalski if we were still with the column. He got transferred out a month later, sent home with what they called battle fatigue. I heard he spent time in a hospital, never really came back right. Rodriguez made it to the end of the war, went home to Texas, and I lost track of him. Miller took a piece of shrapnel through the turret in March, died before we could even get him out of the tank. Kowalski survived, made it all the way to Berlin, got a Bronze Star, and never talked to me about those 2 days again. I made it home in '46, tried to go back to normal life, but normal didn't exist anymore. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced I could hear engines in the distance, convinced I could smell that fog, that cold, wet, suffocating fog. I'd check the windows, make sure I knew where I was, remind myself I wasn't in France anymore, but part of me never left. I'm 94 years old now. The crew of Lucky Strikes is all gone except me. The war's been over for longer than most people have been alive, but I still remember every minute of those 48 hours. The fear, the cold, the weight of that tank around me, feeling like a coffin 1 minute and the only safe place in the world the next. The sound of Rodriguez whispering prayers in Spanish, the way Patterson's hands shook when he lit a cigarette, the look in Kowalski's eyes when he realized we were alone. People ask me sometimes what war was like, what it was really like, and I never know what to say. How do you explain that kind of fear to someone who's never felt it? How do you make them understand that it wasn't the fighting that broke you? It was the waiting, the not knowing, the being lost in the fog with no idea if you'd ever find your way home. I tell them war is loud. War is chaos. War is seeing your friends die and keeping on because stopping means you die too. All of that's true. But the thing they don't put in movies, the thing that stays with you forever, is the quiet moments. The times when you're sitting in a barn in enemy territory, listening to your own heartbeat, wondering if the next sound you hear will be the last thing you ever hear. The times when you're so tired and scared and lost that you don't even feel human anymore, just a thing operating a machine, trying to survive 1 more hour. That's what war is. It's being 19 years old and learning that fear isn't something you overcome. It's something you carry. It's realizing that luck is the only thing separating you from the guys who didn't make it back. It's knowing that even when you do make it home, part of you is still out there, still lost in that fog, still trying to find your way back to the column. I drive past tanks sometimes, museums, memorials, parades. People take pictures, kids climb on them, everyone's smiling. And I see a Sherman, and for just a second I'm back in the driver's seat. I can smell the oil and the sweat. I can feel the controls under my hands. I can hear Kowalski's voice on the intercom, calm and steady, telling me which way to turn. And then it passes, and I'm just an old man looking at a piece of history. But I remember. God help me. I remember every second of those 48 hours. The day our tank got separated from the column. The day we spent lost in enemy territory. The day I learned that surviving doesn't mean you made it out whole. I still hear the engines sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet. Still smell that fog. Still feel that fear sitting in my gut like a stone. And I know, as sure as I know my own name, that I never really made it all the way back. Part of me is still out there, still 19, still scared, still lost in the fog. Some guys came home with medals. Some came home with scars you could see. I came home with something else. Something that doesn't show up on X-rays or medical reports. I came home with the knowledge that the worst thing about war isn't dying. It's surviving and having to live with what you saw, what you did, what you didn't do. The tank commander told me once back during training that every tanker starts out scared and stupid, And the goal is to stay alive long enough to just be scared. He was wrong. You don't just stay scared, you stay terrified, you stay lost, and no matter how many years pass, no matter how far you get from that field, that village, that barn, you never really find your way back. That's the truth they don't tell you. That's the thing that stays with you long after the guns go quiet and the fog finally lifts. War doesn't end when you come home. It just gets quieter. And sometimes, late at night when I close my eyes, I'm back in that driver's seat, staring through a periscope the size of a mail slot, trying to see through fog so thick it might as well be solid, trying to find my way home, still trying, always trying, and knowing I never will.